everybody. How you doing? Again, Kenny White with Cory Neale.
Good
We're
evening.
going to have a little conversation, and I'll ask him a few questions, and he'll do his best to give you the answers that he sees fit. All right? So without any ado, here's Cory Neale.
Thank you, Kenny. And thank you, City Arts Salon.
So Cory, I know, my voice will probably be picked up. It sure is.
Sure.
So I'm just going to ask you a couple of questions, and we can see what happens, and we'll take it from there.
Right on.
All right. So tell us a little bit about yourself. How did you get started, and how did you evolve how would you say you evolved as an artist?
Okay. Yeah. My name's Cory Neale. I'm an artist here in Philadelphia. Born and raised. All my schooling's in Philadelphia. I went to Central High School, Philadelphia, where that was sort of the start of my artistic journey. I had great teachers there. Graduated from Temple Architecture. I think that also contributed greatly to my interest in the topics that I choose for sort of this lifelong pursuit of work that reflects the city. Let me see. So among other things, among the visual art, I also do sound design for theaters and dance companies as well. And that all stems from being a musician. I play double bass. I played double bass for 30 years or so. That's sort of my, another one of my lifelong pursuits is music and visual art. So I guess the evolution, those two things really, they do work in concert. The sound design, working with theaters, trying to develop a sense of space, I think is really important in that sort of work. And that's something that sort of carries over into my visual work of space and emotion and depth and coloration, whether it's in mood or something that you're actually looking at, something visual. So I think those two things sort of created a symbiotic relationship throughout my life to inform one another as I've gone through and arrived here. Yeah.
Wow. Okay, that's good to know. I guess I don't know if you touched on it, but was there some significant event in your artistic career, something that said this is what I want to do? Or I understand you're a musician.
Understood.
And you do production work.
Right.
At what point in your life did you decide that this was the path that I was going to take?
So, quick story. One of the things, one of my sort of artistic professional activities is co-producing a residency in Massachusetts called eMERGE, Interdisciplinary Collaborative Arts Residency. So the first year that I applied for that, it's a 2-week boarding residency, so you actually live there. It's up in Massachusetts. And for some reason, I had a theater show. I was going to arrive a couple days late. So on that Tuesday of that week, I'm driving up there, and it's dark, it's starting to snow, it's very hazardous. I get to the top of this mountain. There's this lit house there. I have my bass and all of my musical and artistic visual art equipment with me, bringing everything I possibly could. So I arrived there, it's about 7 o'clock at night. I turned the car off and I turned the car back on. And I was going to drive back home because I was telling myself that you can't do this. You don't deserve to be happy as an artist. This is impossible. So I actually had to use the restroom, which is what saved me, because I turned the car off and I went into that house and immediately was met with other artists from around the world, and that just took my mind off of that doubt. I felt like I belonged immediately. So it was in that moment that that I sort of decided that, you know, professional pursuit of art is a thing, and it's worthy of pursuit. It's worthy of exploration, and you know, it makes the world a better place, and also makes oneself a better person. So
That's absolutely true.
Yeah.
And I'm sure who's ever listening can also understand that. I mean, it's really to me the truth.
Yeah.
You know, and you know, once you let yourself go, you know, you're free to pursue that. You know, you let all the doubt go. You're free to pursue it.
Yeah.
Wow, that's great.
And I was really fortunate to have that happen in a moment rather than over this slow motion, sort of not realizing it and being lost in it. It was just a choice in that moment, and you know, I sort of did the George Costanza thing. What is the opposite of what you would typically do? Typically, I would just revert back to my professional career and go on about life. I could be in bed and wake up tomorrow for work, you know, and instead I decided to sort of stick it out and see what happens, you know, take that experiment.
Absolutely, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Appreciate you sharing that with us.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess what I'm going to ask you is about your artistic process, but I also would like to know, or have you explain, while you're talking about your artistic process, maybe some of the pieces that you have here.
Sure.
You know, that might give them a little bit more insight into what it is you do and how you do it and why you do it.
Sure. Thanks for that question. Yeah. So as I mentioned before, I started my first, what you see behind me is all watercolor. I was first introduced to watercolor by Peter Fox at Temple University in their architecture program in the Beaux-Arts rendering course, 3 colors and a neutral. Most 90% of these paintings are done with 3 colors and a neutral, so I've sort of stuck out that process. I find it's easier palette to control. So watercolors, it just sort of found me, and I found it very easy to express what I want, what I see very quickly, and have it be realized very quickly. I think those who are oil painters know how long it takes, how laborious the process is. And one can be free with oils and acrylics and other media, but I found watercolor to be just so quick and so succinct in its expression, in its color value. So that's why I use watercolor. And you know, having been born, raised, educated in Philadelphia, and a real commitment to this city, it's sort of an endless supply of topical things to explore, using light and shadow and color and even texture and grit, all of those things. So there's a sort of parallel study that I was doing at one time over a course of years, through a series of workshops at Fleischer Art Memorial. My teacher was Karen Baumeister, who is an abstract acrylic painter, sort of taught me how to be very intuitive with paint and quick and make decisions and see what happens and accept, you know, as Bob Ross says, there are no happy accidents. Or I'm sorry, there are no mistakes, only happy accidents. So I really learned how to, internalize that and live by that. And watercolor is the perfect media because it has a life of its own as you work with it. But the reason I mentioned Karen and my work in this sort of abstract acrylic world that I was exploring was one of the things I was exploring through that work was scale and size, and these canvases were getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And, you know, I'm always trying to sort of unify, you know, going back to the interdisciplinary nature of the residency, working with dance and music, all these things of different media informing each other. And within my own work, I decided to explore watercolor in scale. And so that's what you see behind me in experiments with size of works. That's 44 by 64, which is sort of the limits of the production of watercolor paper now. So that I wanted to see what happened when you brought this city sketching motif, watercolor, when you brought it up to a large scale, what would happen when you try to unite those things. And so the works behind me are, you know, they're all, paintings are always experiments, but these are experiments on a few different levels, both in terms of media and scale. I found it very satisfying to work in a large scale.
Say hey, Pauline, thank you.
Hey, who's that?
Pauline Houston McCall.
Oh, right.
She said, wow, beautiful.
Yeah, thank you, appreciate it. Yeah, I'm happy that people are watching.
Yeah,
Thank you.
that is awesome.
Yeah.
Thanks. So you kind of touched on everything that I think I wanted to talk to you about. But I did have a question, and you did touch on it for a moment.
Yeah.
I remember during your show, I was talking to your brother,
Mm-hmm.
and he said you did abstract.
Yes.
And he was kind of partial to your abstract. You know, I guess the question is, you know, I guess these are abstract in a sense.
Mm-hmm.
So what, and you did probably mention it just through that little speech you just said. But what, do you still do abstracts like that? I mean, abstract expressionist or abstract, like your brother said he was interested in?
Yeah. Currently I don't, but there's always a but. You know, this having you receive my work and hung here. You know, I use that as sort of this milestone. In many ways, it's a milestone for me to have my work hung here, but and also to sort of like not bring to a close, but gather together what I was trying to do with scale and with watercolor. And it has me thinking, what is that next step? And what happens when, you know, so for instance, so these are watercolor paintings, and they're all stretched watercolor paper, sort of like a canvas. So what happens when, you know, taking paper, still stretching it, but treating it with different materials, taking different media and applying it and using it in conjunction with watercolor. And I think the way I would investigate that at first, because even though I do enjoy doing realism painting, you know, still life, abstract is where, like I said before, I find the quickest, most succinct way to get what I'm feeling out onto paper or canvas. So, you know, lately I've been thinking, you know, these abstractified cityscapes might become even further abstracted. And what happens when I try to break down, you know, because all of these have some bit of realism, you can recognize what they are, but what happens when I further define the topics that I'm looking at and break them down and find a more abstract expression of what it is, the space, the color, light, you know, what happens when I break it down even further, sort of like going down to split an atom. You know, you go further and further and further. So that next step, I think, is probably in a more abstract direction. Certainly, probably, definitely not in the photorealistic direction. Probably, I think abstract is in my roots, and I think that is a sort of an appropriate direction to go after this milestone here.
Well, I got to tell you, we certainly appreciate you working with us and showing your work here. I mean, it's beautiful. We love the work, and and meeting you, it's been great. I just want to say that, again, we are here at the City Arts Salon want to show artists who may have never been shown, but we want to provide an opportunity, and we call it a wall for you to show your work. And we do our best to promote it, to bring people out. But this was a good show, I have to say. It was one of our better shows, and so we really appreciate you participating. And I guess I'm going to say that's it. If you have something you want to say.
Yeah, well, I likewise appreciate being here. And one thing I did want to say is that, even being in Philadelphia for all my life, there's still the arts community is really big here, even though it may be dilute across the city. So what I appreciate about being here is meeting you. I feel like I've met a lifelong friend, really, honestly. And also being exposed and introduced to people in our arts community that I may have never met before. I met some great people at the opening, and I met an old Central grad, Floyd Kelly, so that's how community happens, and I appreciate you providing the space for that to happen.
Well, that's what we say. Here at the City Arts Salon, we bring arts and the community together.
Yeah.
So, it's really, I really enjoy doing these shows, and we're going to continue to do them as long as we can.
Right.
So, but with that said, I'm going to take these off. With that said, let's see, maybe I should bring the camera up a little bit. With that said, I'm going to thank Cory for coming and sitting down with us. I hope you had an opportunity to at least get some insight into who he is as an artist, and maybe as a person also, which this is partially what we try to do with these Facebook Live events.